Hey everybody, today is February 27th, so we'll be looking at February 26th MTG stocks. And we can see that we got a pretty big spike here. I'll be kind of going into that, seeing what's up with that. And nothing too much on the daily list. We'll look at a couple of ones just because they're sort of interesting cards to talk about. And you can see that Kroxas, yeah, sure, I don't know. That one got a pretty big spike increase as well. And there's no big price decreases either. You can kind of see that Reap went down. We talked about this last time. It's kind of like a price spike from the Command Knight, sorta, and then it's been going down pretty quickly. Well, not pretty quickly, but it's been going down. It's going back more to its normal state, but it's still, I think last time we saw it was like $2. So, well, it went from $2 to like 12, but now it's going back down to like $8, $9. So we'll see. So go and get into our first card of the night, which is Grinding Station. Grinding Station went from $8.88 to $21.92. Pretty big price jump. And let's go and look at what it does. Grinding Station costs 2 colorless mana. It's an artifact, and you can tap it, sacrifice an artifact. Target player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield, you may untap Grinding Station. So this is kind of like one of those weird ones where you're like, okay, I guess you can mill out somebody. That's one way to do it, I guess. It's kind of like, it's still like a weird card. You know, you have to get to the point of actually being able to play a bunch of artifacts and then untapping it and sacrificing artifacts and blah, blah, blah. And so what it actually is, instead of milling your opponent, you're going to sort of mill yourself. And first thing we'll get into is, we talked about this one before, but one of the combo pieces to this is Underworld Breach. Of course, Underworld Breach is basically gives all your cards escape, and kind of the idea is that with Grinding Station, if you have basically any 0 mana artifact, you can put the 0 mana artifact out, sacrifice it with Grinding Station, and then when you do that, you can mill yourself 3. Then you can use Underworld Breach, exile those 3 cards you just discarded into your graveyard through Grinding Station, play the 0 mana artifact, and then when the 0 mana artifact comes out, it'll untap Grinding Station, and you just kind of rinse and repeat, and you mill yourself out. And then, you know, once you do that, you're like, okay, good, I milled myself out. What's that do for me? Well, the other big card from Theros is, of course, going to be Thras's Oracle. Thras's Oracle is basically, if you have no library, you win the game, or if you have close to no library, you win the game. So this is where kind of the big key components comes into play, and apparently this deck is doing pretty well in Modern. That's kind of like where it's being priced, or where the spike has occurred. So pretty interesting to see, like, kind of a weird card like this. It's like one of those common cards you see from the past where you're like, okay, this is pretty specific, but it's one of those other things that, like, if you look at this, you're like, okay, there's probably some way to cheat this, and whether it be in the past they cheated it or in the present they cheated it, it definitely has some good mechanics that can go for it. I feel like Underworld Breach is getting to a point where it's enabling a lot of combos, and I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if it's going to get banned. I don't know if it's ban worthy really, but it's kind of interesting how much it has propelled. You know, it's like, I feel like there's been a lot of things that we've talked about with Underworld Breach. So interesting. Don't know if it's ban worthy because I don't play enough of Modern or any of those kind of formats aside from Commander. But in Commander, I'm assuming it's not ban worthy, but it is definitely pretty cool. So now that we've talked about that, let's go and go to our second card of the night, which is Goblin Goliath. This one went from a whole 506 to 558. And this isn't like, this wasn't really like any big reason, like a big price increase or anything like that. I just thought it was an interesting card. So the other kind of interesting thing to note about this is it came from the Game Night set, which was just kind of like a set where you basically, it has a deck of each color. So you have, like, you know, one's a red deck, one's a green deck, one's a black deck, one's a blue deck, one's a white deck. And they basically, the idea was that you can get 5 people together and just play a 5-way battle. kind of like the idea, at least as far as I remember. I've never played it actually, so I'm not an expert here. But anyways, Goblin Goliath is a 4 colorless red 5/4 creature goblin mutant. When it enters the battlefield, create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to the number of opponents you have. So for goblin decks, not bad. Usually, like when you're playing Commander, or I guess especially if you're playing actually Game Night allows you to get 4 tokens, and Commander gives you 3, so still pretty decent, assuming there are 3 opponents alive still. But then it also has 3 colorless red and tap it. If a source you control would deal damage to an opponent this turn, it deals double that damage to that player instead. So this is pretty good. This is basically, there are enchantments and things like that allow you to double damage, but usually I feel like those things are like, oh, you're gonna deal damage to yourself, and that's no bueno, especially like in mono red. Maybe if you do like red white, you'll have something that lets you deal damage to somebody else and not take double damage yourself. But there's only I think there's only one thing that does that, and that's like the angel. I can't remember its name. It's like Gilslith or something like that. But it's pretty nice because this just gives you a way to, well, it's probably not a huge surprise because they'll see that this is on the field, but it's still one of those things where you're like, okay, maybe you cast Banefire, you make it deal like 5 or 10 damage, and now you're doubling it. Pretty crazy. Or if you come in with just a bunch of creature tokens, even, you come in with 10 goblins, now they're doing 20 damage, if they're 1/1s anyways. And so there's a lot of cool things that I feel like this can do, and I feel like for a commander deck, it's still pretty decent. I mean, still a 6 mana 5/4 that makes 3 1/1s isn't bad, but having a huge ability like double damage on a targeted player is pretty good. So I like it. So let's go to our third card of the night, which is the Protean Hulk. Protean Hulk went from $4.99 to $4.33, so a slight price decrease. It could be even less than that based on Scryfall here, but Protean Hulk is potentially infamous, depending on how you look at it. Protean Hulk costs 5 colorless, green, and it's a 6/6 creature beast. When Protean Hulk dies, search your library for any number of creature cards with a total converted mana cost 6 or less, and put them into your battlefield and then shuffle your library. This is where it gets a little bit crazy because you get to get any amount of creatures that cost 6 or less and put them in your library. So technically, if you somehow or for some reason put 10 zero-cost creatures in your deck, Protean Hulk can get all 10 of those creatures out. Now, of course, again, when you're looking at least Commander, looking at CEDH, there are certainly combos that you can do with this, and basically as soon as you get Protean Hulk to die, it creates this crazy combo, and you can basically win right there. And what a lot of people like to do is use a card called Flash, and Flash basically you pay 2, a colorless and a blue. You put a creature card from your hand, and this is at instant speed, so this is kind of like the reason why it's called Flash. But you put a creature card from your hand in the battlefield. If you don't pay its mana cost, then you sacrifice it. So basically you pay 2, you then immediately sacrifice Protean Hulk. Protean Hulk gets his death ability here, and you pretty much win the game. Or you win the game. The combo it's out there. It's pretty spooky, I'd say. But yeah, there's spooky things that you can do with this. So since I don't play like CEDH, like I don't really care. I mean, I guess if you're playing CEDH, I don't really care if you're using it either. But like in a normal Commander game, I guess a non-CEDH Commander game, like Protean Hulk is just really good in general, because I mean you're still paying 7 mana and then getting out potentially one really big creature, or you're getting out all the small amount of creatures that gets you some sort of combo, or even just potentially card draw or anything like that. So even in a non-CEDH format, I think Protean Hulk is of course very good. The only thing about it is that I can see it being slightly annoying in the sense of if you are like, okay, I'm going to search for my deck, and then you're like really trying to add up at like 6 mana or really trying to optimize it. You don't have like a huge plan. Like I can see it being slow, and other people are maybe like, ugh. But I mean, if you have like a good idea what you're going for, and as long as the table you're at is prepared for it in the sense of if you're going to combo off, they're prepared for it, or prepared for it in the sense of you're not going to combo off and you kind of know what you're doing with it. So, but regardless, it's a good card. Surprised it's. I assume it's going to be banned because I think it was banned. It's either Flash that was banned or it was Protean Hulk that was banned in Commander, and they brought it back. So it's one of those things where I feel like it could be banned either again or in general, just because it's very powerful in CEDH. I've heard that it's kind of warping the meta. I forget where I heard that. I think it's probably Command Knight's podcast or something. But it's interesting, definitely. Let's go and go to our next card, which is Kroxas, Titan of Death's Hunger. Kroxas went from 970 to 1948, which is a pretty huge price increase. So let's go ahead and kind of read what this thing does. Kroxas, Titan of Death cost black and red, so pretty low mana cost. When it enters battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. So this kind of reminds us of the blue-green guy, which I think is like Uro. So kind of like, it's not the same kind of like giant kind of deal where it comes on the battlefield, sacrifice unless it escaped, and that has an escape cost down here. Let's see, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, each opponent discards a card. Then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3 life. And then it has escape. You can play black, red, exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. So I was kind of looking around. I didn't see like a huge like tell. I didn't see like a combo or anything that specifically just made this card really stand out. But I think it's just one of those cards that like people realize, oh, this is pretty good. This is a pretty good card. It kind of reminds me of like Ridden 6 a little bit, because when Ridden 6 came out, it started at $20, which is, still pretty pricey. But then like suddenly people are like, oh, this is really good, and then they were like, well, bam, and suddenly it became like $80 and $90, and it was crazy how much like it just the price spiked in a day. But this one, I think, let's go ahead and kind of like read this again. So enters battlefield or attacks, each opponent discards a card, then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card. So who didn't discard a non-land card. Reading cannot compute apparently. Who didn't discard a non-land card. So when we say non-land card, that means like instant who didn't discard an instant card. Oh, so okay, yeah. Whew. Like apparently, me smart. But this basically means that if you didn't, or if you discarded a land, then you lose 3 life. Or I guess I should say, if you didn't discard a card, or you didn't discard a land, or if you didn't discard a card, or you discarded a land, you lose 3 life. That's what you say. So they're basically saying if you discard a land, you're going to be punished by losing 3 life, which doesn't seem like a huge deal. But I think with Kroxas, you got to kind of remember that you pay 2 for it, comes out, and then you have to discard a card. I mean, 2 mana makes someone discard a card and then potentially lose 3 life is pretty decent. And then the fact that you can bring it back for 4 as a 6/6, I think like the initial effect of these like giants, is pretty good. Like the blue-green one that we talked about, Uro, that's a pretty decent enter battlefield effect. And then, but it's the thing that like the fact that you pay 4 and bring out a 6/6 and then also get its effect again, and then every time it attacks, it does that effect again. It's one of those things where like if you build around this, it could be really good. And I think it's kind of like what people are realizing as well. Is like it's 2 mana ability, discarding card, maybe losing 3 life. Sure, not bad. But then it's like or you're bringing back a 6/6 that gets that ability, and then it reoccurs that ability every time it attacks is even spookier. And yeah, I can see why this card went up. I think these giants are very good. I like Rakdos a lot, but like one of the problems with Rakdos is that it always kind of like a discard theme, and so like as much as I like to make this like a commander or something, I just don't care about discard themes only because it's like, okay, well, you're just going to be at huge hand disadvantage, and if I get you to the point where you basically have no hand, it's kind of just like, oh boy, top decking. So I don't know. I've never been a huge fan of it myself, but I can understand why this is really appealing to other commander players. And this is still like a good standard / modern pioneer, whatever. Maybe not modern, but pioneer and standard I think is still pretty good. So let's go to our commander of the night, which is Chulane, Teller of Tales. Chulane is a 2 colorless Bant, so 2 colorless, green, white, blue. And I know how much as I like Golgari and Dredge and all that, but it's kind of funny is that my friend, he had a Dredge deck, and I think it's where I started really liking Dredge. But I remember when I played Shards of Alara way back when, Bant was my favorite color scheme, and surprisingly not Jund or something of that nature. And so it's kind of interesting that I like Bant so much, even though it doesn't feel like Dredge at all. But I don't know, whatever. Somehow I got into that color scheme, and then I kind of like really sunk into Golgari and Rakdos when I got back into it. But Bant's still like one of those things I really like. Anyways, Chulane, Teller of Tales is a 2/4 legendary creature human druid. He has vigilance, and whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So Chulane is basically just a huge way to draw cards and ramp. It's pretty spooky. Like the fact that it says whenever you cast. So the only problem is that enter the battlefield effects don't work. But still, it's whenever you cast. So I guess the good thing is that you at least get the trigger even if the creature doesn't enter the battlefield or gets countered. But, drawing a card and putting a land for every time you cast a creature is good. And then the fact that he has recursion on this, and what I mean by that is that you can pay 3 colorless and tap him, and you return a target creature you control to its owner's hand. And so what I mean by the kind of like recurring effect is that you can pay 3 colorless, tap it, and you can return target creature you control to its owner's hand. So this basically allows you to really allows you to kind of abuse your enter the battlefield effects, because you'll want enter the battlefield effects with Chulane just for the fact that you're getting his effect, you're mana ramping. You could probably pull off really, really good enter the battlefield effects. Trying to think of like a super spooky one. I mean, I guess I don't know. There's tons, but I can't think of one right now. Like, okay, how about this? So we'll say like Avenger Zendikar. Avenger Zendikar is always spooky in my mind, but Avenger Zendikar is basically when he enters the battlefield, you put in X plant 0/1 plant tokens, where X is the number of lands you control. And then he has the ability whenever you play a land, or whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, then they put a +1/+1 counter on each plant. So kind of the idea is that with Chulane, you should be able to mana ramp quickly. Then you cast Zendikar, and then you get another land, which doesn't help you at this turn, only because you cast your creature first, so the land comes to the battlefield before Avenger Zendikar. But once Avenger Zendikar is on the battlefield, if you can use Chulane's ability, like let's say if you cast like a small creature, like a Lorwyn Elf or anything, that means you can potentially put another land into the battlefield, helps you out quite a bit, etc. But the next turn, return target, you can use his ability, pay 3, tap it, return target creature you control to its owner's hand, so then you can untap it, put out Avenger Zendikar again, make a whole bunch of more plant tokens. That's where it gets pretty spooky, the fact that you can just keep reoccurring very powerful enter the battlefield effects, which is nice. It's neat. And kind of the card I want to highlight here is not so much a card that you can abuse enter the battle effect. I mean, like we talked about Avenger Zendikar there for a minute, but The kind of random card of the night is Shrieking Drake. Shrieking Drake costs 1 blue, is a 1/1 creature Drake, and it has flying. But when it enters the battlefield, return a creature you control to its owner's hand. So when we think about this, we're like, okay, so I can return a creature. I mean, Chulane kind of does that already, so why do I need Shrieking Drake? Well, the good thing about Shrieking Drake is that if you have Chulane on the battlefield, you put Shrieking Drake down, and technically, one way to look at it is like, okay, well, he costs 2 less than Chulane's ability, so that's one way to look at it if you're kind of like mana, not if you just don't have quite a bit of enough mana to return a creature you really want to return. The other thing to look at is that Shrieking Drake, you can return himself, because it says when he enters or when he comes into play, so he has to be on the battlefield, so he can technically use his ability to target himself. So once you put him on the battlefield, you target him, put him back to your hand. You're like, okay, well, what does that do for me? Well, if we go back to Chulane's ability, he allows you to draw a card and put a land. So basically, for 1 mana, you are playing Explore for 1 mana, and you're going to keep recurring this. And I think it's pretty crazy, because I mean, you know, like, it's only 1 less mana, which is, I guess, technically half the mana cost, but you are still reoccurring this multiple times. So if you had like 5 blue mana, you can now draw 5 cards and put 5 lands down. So I think that's where like it really shines, and it's kind of like one of those neat things where you're like, you know, back in the past it was probably like, this is awful, I don't want to return a creature to my hand because these are just a 1 mana 1/1. But then when you can really think about like the combos and what it can do for you, especially with Chulane, really neat stuff, cool stuff. So let's go ahead and end off our night with a couple of random cards as always. So random card number 1, New Benalia. It's a land. When it enters battlefield tapped. When it enters battlefield, you scry 1, and you can tap and add 1 white mana. Nothing too crazy. It's really back in Future Sight? Huh. Yeah. Huh. It's got I like that old Future Sight symbol. I don't know why. It just reminds me, I guess, when I played Future Sight. But and if you're not aware what Scry 1 does, basically look at the top card of your library. You may put that card on the bottom of your library. So this allows you to kind of filter your deck a little bit better. So nothing crazy. There are a bunch of different ways to scry lands or draw lands or etc. lands. This is kind of one of those things where I don't know. It's probably not like the most important thing to get. So it's an okay, whatever, random card. I do like the art, kind of like the stadium almost. I don't know. I guess maybe it's probably a city. It probably would make more sense, but whatever. Let's go to our random card of the night number 2. See if we can get something a little bit more interesting. You want to take a guess what we got? We got a forest. Amazing. Who would have thought? All right. So let's go and go to our 3rd card of the night. Apparently, random card number 3, Brain in a Jar. There we go. That's something interesting. Brain in a Jar is a 2 colorless artifact. It has 2 abilities. The first ability is you pay colorless, tap it, put a charge counter on Brain in a Jar. Then you may cast an instant or sorcery. Oh God. God. All right, we have an unexpected guest behind me, sitting on the chair. Oh God. Anyways, so Brain in a Jar is a 2 colorless artifact. You can pay 1 colorless, tap it, and you put a charge counter on Brain in the Jar. Then you may cast an instant or sorcery card with a converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Brain in a Jar from your hand without paying its mana cost. So basically, it's kind of like a small up pay. So like the first time you put a counter on Brain in the Jar, then you can cast a 1 mana cost instant, and then the second time you do it, cast a 2 mana cost instant, and 3 and 4 and etc. So like if you have a lot of instants in your deck, I guess, then you can kind of abuse it. But you know, if you get to the point where you're like, okay, I have 6 or 7 counters on it, I can't cast anything anymore. Its second ability here is you can pay 3, tap it, remove X charge counters from Brain in a Jar, and you can scry X. So like if you had 5 counters on it, you want to go back down to 2. You can pay 3, tap it, and remove 3 charge counters and scry 3, which allows you to filter a little bit better. So It's not like amazing, but I think it's interesting. I'm not sure like if there's a way to abuse it. I could see like if you had a populate deck, or not populate, proliferate deck, and you're trying to like really be cheesy and cast out certain big cards, then sure. But I think that's a pretty limited for what you're trying to do. But I still kind of like it. I think there's interesting things you could do with it. It'd be definitely more in a creatureless deck, or few creature deck, I should say. Anyways, hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.